Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session. My name is Chris Buerta, Commercial Manager for the Digital Workplace Division in First Digital, a First technology company. We're excited to host today's event and give you this great introduction to Sunset Point software. As organizations accelerate their IT modernization efforts, the landscape is cluttered with increasing volumes of legacy systems. These outdated systems, while no longer in primary use, create a labyrinth of technical debt that bewilders employees and customers alike, posing severe security threats and compliance risk that can undermine brand integrity. In this essential webinar, discover the strategic importance of adopting a disciplined approach to decommissioning software, and we'll delve into the effective strategies to not only archive legacy system data in compliance with organizational access controls and record retention policies, but also to ensure that this information remains accessible and operational for informed future decision-making. Before we start, just a quick bit of housekeeping. Joining me on the session this morning is Joe Lipper from the Sunset Point software team. Today's session will be recorded and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel. Details will be shared after the session. Feel free to refer colleagues or share the link alike. Due to the size of the audience, everyone will be muted, and we ask that you please post questions in the Q&A panel inside your Teams call window. You'll find access to the Q&A window by clicking the icon in the top right-hand side of your Teams call window. Feel free to post any questions there. Questions will be answered towards the end of the session. It's unlikely that we'll reach everyone and get answers to all of your questions, but please feel free to share your contact details and we'll reach out and connect with you afterwards. And also, please feel free to use the emojis to express your emotion. So just quickly, I head up the digital workplace area or practice within First Digital. This is everything on around the O365 ecosystem, but feel free to reach out to us for any of our other practice areas and specializations should you need support in those areas.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Joe LeBay. I'm the COO of Sunset Point Software. I'd like to thank the folks at First Digital for hosting today's event, and thank you all for attending. I think you're going to be pretty intrigued with what you see today, although we might be talking about an area that a lot of folks, at least based on the research that we have done, don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about. But we believe we've put together a solution that will make the decommissioning of software a lot easier, and even more importantly, make the information that is archived a lot more operational. So just a little bit of background on me that I think is relevant to today's discussion. For the first half of my career, I was a systems integrator, spending a lot of time helping organizations get the most out of their application software infrastructure. And then in 2003, I got the crazy idea to go out and start a software company, which is called RatchetSoft, which ultimately created one of the first, if not the first, RPA platforms on the market. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the term RPA, it stands for Robotic Process Automation. And basically, RPA is a software discipline that leverages software robots for the purposes of mimicking human behavior when it comes to interacting with software. And the reason why we create these robots is so that we can automate mundane tasks and also aid with system integration for applications that do not have APIs. So we could use RPA for the purposes of pushing information into applications or extracting information for applications. And the reason why I mention RPA in my background in that is because a big part of the Sunset Point software story is the use of RPA robots to help decommission these applications. And I think that'll become a lot more clear as we run through. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to be talking about decommissioning, more specifically legacy system decommissioning, and we'll define it. We'll also talk about how our organization's doing with decommissioning today. And I can tell you in advance, the answer is not particularly well. We'll get to that. We'll then take a look at Legacy Snapshot, which is our solution for decommissioning. And then we'll finish up with talking about how Legacy Snapshot helps organizations not only reduce risk, but also create what we like to call the Immortal Enterprise. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to start with a definition of legacy application decommissioning. This is not my definition. This comes from an organization called Brickenden Consulting in the UK, and I think it's a very good definition. Basically, legacy application decommissioning is the strategic approach for systematically retiring one or more outdated, costly legacy applications without compromising business needs, compliance requirements, or data accessibility to maintain business continuity. So there's a lot there, but basically the bottom line is that, as Chris had mentioned, there are these applications that have overstayed their welcome. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to discern which applications should be decommissioned. In fact, there's an entire consulting discipline associated with how an organization goes about building that systematic, or what we call decommissioning discipline. But the systems that we're talking about are those that tend to be very expensive to maintain, or are no longer supported by the underlying vendor. Systems that are inflexible and no longer able to function within the rest of the organization's application infrastructure, which results in a degraded performance for users and for customers alike. Systems that represent a security vulnerability because they have fallen behind the rest of the organization's application or software infrastructure, and applications that provide some kind of risk with regard to compliance. And so, based on this definition, the first question I would ask is, are companies doing this well? And the spoiler alert answer is that most organizations do not have a decommissioning discipline. So if you're listening to what I'm saying and you're saying to yourself, well, we don't really decommission systems well here, I don't even know how we do it, don't worry, because you're in great company. A lot of huge organizations struggle with this same problem. So now, I've only been involved with decommissioning in the past year and a half, so I had to come up to speed pretty quickly with regard to how organizations are doing this. My journey all started about a year and a half ago. So the company that I had talked about before, RatchetSoft, I sold in 2018 to St. Louis-based Knowledge Lake. And I had a 4-year contract with them. And about 3.5 years into that contract, I started to get the entrepreneurial itch because I'm a business builder at heart. And so I started thinking about, well, what am I going to do? What problem with the skills that I have can I go out and solve? And I just happened to, at the same time, make a trip to the doctor for my annual checkup. And at the end of the checkup, the doc sits me down and he says, Joe, I'm looking at your medical records here, and although I only have your medical records for the past 3 years, and I stopped him and I said, well, how could that possibly be? I've been coming to this medical healthcare system for over a decade. How is it that you only have the last 3 years of my medical records? And he said, well, we did a 8-figure conversion of our EMR, our electronic medical record system, from something called Allscripts over to Epic, which has become somewhat of an industry standard these days. And he said they were supposed to bring over all of the medical records, but they only brought over 3 years worth. So if I need to get your medical records, Joe, here's what I need to do. I need to send a fax request over to a woman named Mary in Nutley, New Jersey, who will go into the warehouse and she will pull up your records, put them in a FedEx envelope, and send them to me. And the records desk guarantees a week turnaround time. And I said, well, let's hope that there's nothing seriously wrong with me, because I may not have enough time for Mary to go and work her magic. So I left there thinking, how could this healthcare system that serves 23 million people here in the United States, how in the world could they have this problem? So I talked to my friend George. George was my partner at RatchetSoft. He's also my partner here at Sunset Point Software. And I said, George, I went to the doctor today, and here's what happened. And I told him the story. And he said, well, that's interesting. I'm actually working on a project right now for a major university here in the United States, and they have a similar problem. Their problem is that they are migrating from PeopleSoft to Workday. And while we are able to handle their document migration, there's really not much that we can do for the data that's in their application. And believe it or not, Workday, for whatever reason, doesn't have a connector for PeopleSoft. And so they're kind of left rushing around trying to figure out, well, how do we solve that problem? And so we started sketching up some ideas and we came up with some kind of interesting solutions. But then we took a step back and said, okay, well, how big is this problem? Is this a pervasive problem, or did we just happen to stumble upon two, albeit large organizations that uniquely have this problem? So I started doing research, and what I learned was eye-opening. It turns out that over the past 5 to 10 years, organizations have been spending billions of dollars to migrate to the cloud, to hyper automate, to digitally transform. All of these things that organizations would do to modernize their IT. And that's been great. It's created better customer experiences, it's created better employee experiences. But the dirty little secret is that this IT modernization effort has left a significant mess in its wake. And this is how it's manifested. What we're finding out is that we are creating more legacy systems today faster than we ever have before. In fact, when I started to research this idea, one of the things I did was I spoke with Gartner and asked them, well, what are you folks seeing? And their retort to me was that, well, here's what we've seen. In the period of time of 2016 to 2019, organizations in the United States have created 3 times the number of legacy systems, systems that are slated for decommissioning, than they did in the prior 15 years. And that includes Y2K. So, as I said, we're creating more legacy systems faster than ever before. And I believe with now the AI boom, we're going to start to see another wave of systems that need to be decommissioned. And organizations that are being asked to do more with less are falling behind. They don't really have good change management procedures. So folks, customers, and users are kind of left bewildered, kind of like I was when I went to the doctor. I couldn't believe that he didn't have my medical records, right at the click of a button. So these organizations are choking on this technical debt. They're falling behind. The users are confused. They don't know which system is the system of record. They have the new system, the old system. They're doing double data entry. Nobody is happy with it. And all of this is creating a tremendous compliance risk and a security risk that threatens not only the brand, but potentially the business itself. So we've got a big problem here. It's getting worse. It seems to be pervasive. That's all good if I'm looking to start a software company that solves this problem. But why is this happening? We've had systems for decades, my entire career. We've had systems that have had to be decommissioned. Why are we so bad at it? Well, the answer lies within what are the options that are available to organizations when they consider doing decommissioning. And we found that there are 4 options. The first is to just abandon everything. This is easy. This is inexpensive, but it is fraught with all kinds of risk, especially if you happen to operate in an industry that is heavily regulated. You just can't take your old data and throw it out because you're getting rid of the old system. It is virtually impossible for organizations to accurately recreate history. So by throwing everything away, you create a tremendous amount of risk. So throwing everything away, abandoning is generally not a legitimate option. The next option is to mothball. This is something that a lot of organizations do. What they do is they take the old system, wrap it up in shrink wrap, throw it into some far-flung corner of a data center, and hope that nobody comes looking for it. And the reason why they hope nobody comes looking for it is because there's no guarantee that that system is going to boot when it's needed. Remember, that system is not receiving any software updates, no security patches. It's just sitting in an idle state. And just at the time that somebody needs it, there's a good chance that when you go to boot it up, it's not going to boot. Or when it does boot, it represents a significant point of vulnerability because it has fallen woefully behind the rest of your system's infrastructure. And what's the benefit of mothballing? Well, there aren't a whole lot because you're still carrying a lot of the costs. The hardware costs are still tied up. There's probably some software maintenance contract that you're paying to a vendor, and there are probably some people that you're continuing to either keep on payroll or keep in a position to be able to activate that system when needed. So you're really not getting a whole lot of the benefit of turning that system off, and you're getting a lot of the downside. So application mothballing, not an attractive option. Probably the most common solution is just to migrate everything to SQL. And when I say everything, I mean raw data, and I'm using the term raw data specifically because that's basically what it is that you have. When you take an application user interface and you divorce it from the underlying database, what you have left is raw data. And that raw data is important and it could be very valuable, but you're kind of losing half the story by pulling the user interface away. And when you go to migrate this information over to SQL, you have to make sure that you have folks who have deep expertise in that legacy applications architecture. Because remember, these were applications that were probably developed at a time when storage costs are at a premium. And so what a user would see on the screen is not necessarily what was stored in the database. Usually back in the day when you had storage at a cost premium, you would have to reduce what a user would see on a screen down to a series of codes so that you could store it in the database and preserve space. Well, in order to rehydrate that, you need to know the database infrastructure in order to be able to go in and do all the lookups and make sure that you've captured everything in a way that is consumable. And like I said before, once you strip away the user interface, which is what transforms raw data in a database into information that users can use to do their job, it becomes a lot less valuable. But let's say you get it all over. Let's say that you do have experts who know the database inside and out. They do all the lookups. They create a great set of SQL tables. Well, now you have a bunch of SQL tables. And that means that in order for folks to use it, they need to either have requisite skills in writing SQL queries, or they have to learn a new reporting engine, or they have to be experts in something like Microsoft Power BI or Tableau, which I think we can all agree there aren't a whole lot of those expertise in an organization. So while migrating the raw data to SQL does check the compliance box to a certain extent, it really doesn't check the operational box. And we're going to talk a lot about that in a few minutes. And then the last option is to just migrate everything. This is what my doctor thought he was getting when they migrated to Epic. They thought all the medical records were going to be brought over. But what he quickly found out is that it's real expensive. It takes a long time to do. It requires deep expertise in both the old system and the new system in order to do. And even then, if you do everything right, you're still losing things in translation because you don't have 100% fidelity between what was in the old system and how it's presented in the new system. So what happens? These systems linger in a zombie state. They don't get decommissioned. There's a financial reward to doing so, but the people who make the decision to do so generally don't get the benefit of it because when a system falls into maintenance, that budget is usually some broad IT-based budget that nobody's going to get back in their own budget other than the IT department. And so the IT group basically says, well, look, nobody is beating us over the head to turn this system off. So we're not going to. We're just going to punt on it. And the reason why they do that is because they don't feel comfortable answering these questions. Did I preserve everything that we're going to need? Is it in a form that's easy to access and easy to understand for users? Am I complying with records retention policies? Do I even know what our company's record retention policies are? I'm not really sure. And so it all comes down to, am I going to go put my career and my organization at risk by pulling the plug? And since they don't feel comfortable answering these questions, they don't. They just pass on it. Now, how big is this problem? Well, it's kind of hard to get market sizing information on the decommissioning market. If you take a look on Google, you'll find that there's not a whole lot of information about it, but I sense that you're going to start seeing a lot more. But if we do some of the back of the envelope calculations, decommissioning, doing it in a systematic way or developing a decommissioning discipline as I described, is something that's reserved for organizations that are kind of mid-size and large size, only because they have enough systems where it makes sense to do something that is repeatable. Here in the United States, if you look at companies that exceed 100 million in revenue, which I would consider the sweet spot for a decommissioning solution, you're talking about 34,000 plus organizations. On average, those companies have about 10 systems that need to be decommissioned, and on average, those systems represent a $40,000 to $120,000 per year savings if those systems would be decommissioned. So you do a quick calculation and you find out that that's about, using the conservative end of those numbers, about $10.5 billion of work. And if you take a look at the box underneath, that's critically important because this is telling us what is coming. This application modernization effort is only growing. In fact, in 2022, it was $15 billion market. By 2027, it's going to be about a $33 billion market. So again, back to the point I mentioned before about creating more legacy, more systems that need to be decommissioned faster than ever before. This problem is accelerating. This is why we created the product, our company's first product, called Legacy Snapshot. What is a legacy snapshot? A legacy snapshot is an AI-ready, document-based representation of a legacy system when that system is powered down for the last time. What you see here on the screen on the left is a legacy application. In this case, it's called Orange HRMS. It's an HR system that tracks employees and everything related to those employees in the company. And what you're seeing here is an RPA robot. We talked about RPA at the top of the session. An RPA robot is crawling through every record in this application that the organization wants to maintain, and it's crawling through every screen. Think of it as kind of like the Google website crawler. The only difference is we're not grabbing this information for the purposes of indexing it. What we're doing is we're grabbing everything related to the records in that system. We're grabbing screenshots. We'll talk about why that's important. We're grabbing the data as discrete data elements. We are grabbing documents that may be attached to those records. And if there are any reports, we are executing them and capturing that output. If you're a document imaging guy like me from the 80s and 90s, you probably are familiar with the term called COLD, computer output to laserdisc. The way we capture the reports is very similar. So the robots crawl through the application, grabs all that information, packages it up into a PDF file, and that gets stored. And we'll talk about the wisdom of storing information in PDF files, because it may seem counterintuitive, where you might say, Joe, this information already exists in a database. Why are we putting it in documents? That seems like a step backwards. Well, that was the same argument that I heard back when I was talking about RPA in 2004, 2005, albeit it wasn't called RPA then. That name didn't come until 2010 or 11. But people would say, you're using screen scraping techniques for the purposes of automating processes and integrating applications. That seems like a step backwards. Well, RPA is now a $6 billion industry, despite the fact that we have APIs for most applications. It's because it is very helpful. And part of the clever idea behind that was using the user interface, which functions as a universal adapter for any application. Well, we're using the user interface as well in order to decommission a piece of software, because the user interface is the point at which we have access to everything. And when I say everything, I don't mean just what's in the database. I mean what the user sees on their screens when they use the application. So let's talk about what are in these PDF files. We call them collection documents. Now, there's no hard and fast rule about what is in these documents. They tend to take a certain shape, but you're free to put whatever you want to put in those documents as long as it catalogs and maintains everything that you want to maintain. So the first part of this document is what's called a collection title section. And in that collection title section, we have a cover page. We have a clickable table of contents, and we have something called an introduction or preamble. And you can have as many of these as you want in the document. This is a pretty important concept. And so let me spend a little bit of time on what the introduction does. The introduction has no information about the record that this collection document represents. That is further in the document. We'll talk about that. What this is color commentary about why this process was done. Why did we decommission this system? When did we decommission it? What was the nomenclature that we used in the business at the time we decommissioned? Because somebody might look at this system, this document 5 years from now and say, what's a DR6 number? I've never even heard of that. Well, we used to use that 5 years ago, but now in the new system, we call it something else. Oh, okay. What is in these introductions and preambles are all the things that you would want to tell a new employee if they were going to learn the old system, but obviously they're not. So this is information that future users can use to understand what's in this document and understand how to consume it. But more importantly, this section of the document is used to train artificial intelligence, the AI engine, how to consume this document. So we can take these documents, give them to AI, and AI will do the best it can to figure out what's there, but it doesn't know what to focus on. It doesn't know what to look at. It doesn't know the whys behind this. This is where we tell the AI engine all the whys. And so one of the reasons why we put the information in PDF files is because AI engines can natively consume documents are the lingua franca of conversational AI. So if we package all this information up, put it into a document, preface it with all this information, we can now make the AI really smart about what's in these documents so that it'll generate better and faster answers in the future when we converse with it. And we'll talk about that. Other sections, I mentioned application screenshots. Well, those screenshots are the screenshots that you saw on the prior slide when the robot was crawling through the application. The purpose of capturing the screenshot is so that when we present this information back to the user in the future, we're going to show that to them in an interface that they're familiar with. So anybody who used the old system doesn't have to be retrained. They know how to use it. They know how to consume a PDF. They know how to look at the information that used to be on the old screen, which is now on a screenshot, and they can immediately understand what's there. It's not like they have to go run a SQL query, look at a bunch of tables and rows and try to figure out columns and rows and figure out what's there. They're going to see the information presented in the user interface that they used to see. So we're not losing any fidelity with the old system. We also have the discrete data elements. And the reason why we maintain this, and this is probably something that in the future will start to be deprecated, is that we are in this kind of interim period where we are accustomed to doing full text searches like Google. We're accustomed to doing what we old guys call QBE searches, query by example, or field level searches or metadata searches. But we also now have conversational AI. And while we're in this in-between period, if folks want to do these query by example kind of searches, we need to make sure that we have the data that they might want to search on broken out as discrete data elements. And so we have that. That's why we capture them. Of course, we have all the full text in the document. The full text includes all the introductions, all the discrete data elements. We OCR all the screenshots. So all the information contained on those screens is also available contextually within the screenshot. We also have reports and documents. I mentioned that before. Any documents that are attached to records, we can grab those, bring them into the document. Any reports that are there, we can execute the report and capture the output. We can also supplement the information, and that is not only capture the information as it existed in the old system, presented in a way that resembles the old system, but we can also supplement it with information from other applications. We can bring in data from websites. We can attach links. We can basically supplement this information in any way we think will help the future user. So not only are we creating an archive that preserves everything that was in the old system in a form that is consistent, but we can also make it better than it was. You couldn't supplement the old system with this information unless you A, knew about it, and B, went and manually searched for it. But here, we could take static data and bring it in. We could take information that is dynamic in other applications and embed links in the document to it. And then we have things that you'd expect, like the log information. What robot created this document? When did it create it? Did a human verify it? If so, did they make any modifications to it? All of that is captured because eventually this document is going to be digitally signed and locked down. This will become a record of the organization. And then we have the appendix section, which contains the digital signature, any of the PDF conformance information, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're doing, again, in a nutshell, is taking that old system and breaking it out into documents that become records within the organization. So what are the benefits? We talked before about the immortal organization. What we're doing is we are eliminating risk, and we are immortalizing this information by maintaining near 100% fidelity with the old system. We do that by capturing the screenshots, the data as discrete data elements, attached documents, and reports. By maintaining the documents, the information in document form, that allows us to do something else that's very clever, and that is take those documents, those snapshot documents, and bring them into our enterprise content management system, our document management system. SharePoint, OnBase, OpenText, whatever you want. You could take these documents and bring them into that into that ECMS so that they're accessible just like any other documents. And by doing so, we inherit a couple of really good things. First of all, every organization of this size has got one, if not more than one, ECMS. So they know how to manage documents, and they know how to manage the numbers of documents that a legacy snapshot might take the form of. They also have the ability to handle access control. So people will say, Joe, how do I control who accesses which documents? And my answer is, well, how do you do that today in your ECMS? Oh, well, our ECMS has got access control. It's tied into Active Directory. And so we're able to security trim documents that way. Well, you would security trim these documents as well. You would tag them the same way you tag any other documents, and now people will be able to access what they have rights to. In addition to that, we also inherit the ability to dispose of documents. So lots of organizations have their records retention policies, not in the heads of people, but in the rules of an ECMS. And so by bringing these documents into the ECMS, we automatically inherit all of those rules. So if an organization says, well, we're going to bring over everything, but we want to quickly eliminate anything that's over 10 years old, and we don't want to have to do it manually, is there a way that the system could do it? And the answer is sure, but not my system. It's going to be your ECMS because you've already got the rules built into that system. In terms of vendor lock-in, in terms of proprietary software, there is none. We are creating PDF files and metadata files that then you as a customer bring into your ECMS. And we are storing this information in a standard PDF format. PDFs have been around for 30 plus years. They're going to be around for another 30 years. So once a legacy snapshot is created, the association with Sunset Point software for the core data is over. We're not storing it. We're not hosting it. That is all done by our clients so that there is no dependence on us once that snapshot is created. And then, of course, there's the easy and ubiquitous access that we're offering here. By putting it in the ECM, the documents are available to everybody in a form they know how to work with, in a way that they know how to search. How can they search? Field level searches. They can search for any of the metadata just like any other document. They can do a full text search. They can do a Google search and find anything in those documents, including the text that's in the screenshots. They can also do something that's called deep linking. That is specific, a feature that we do offer. And of course, my VM that I wanted to use to show this is not booting today, but fear not, because we have a video that I can walk you through very quickly to show you some of these features. So in the prior slides, you saw that orange HRM application that we were retiring. Well, we were replacing that system with something called Sage HR. This is a screenshot of it here. And so what we've done is we didn't have to do a full migration. Here's one of the employees' records, Naven Johnson. We didn't have to bring in all of Naven's historical information. He's still an employee here, so we needed to create a stub record in this application, but I didn't have to bring over all the old information. I didn't have to go through the cost or the expense of doing so because I created a legacy snapshot. Now, one of the things that we could do is you see this button up here. This is our deep link button that basically is the way that we integrate the legacy snapshot directly into the records of any replacement system. So what I'm going to do is let's skip ahead here to this point. When I click that button, what it does is it reads the screen to get to determine context. It reads the screen and says, okay, what is Joe working on? He's in Sage HR and he's on the Naven Johnson record. Let me check to see if I have a legacy snapshot document for Naven Johnson. And what it does in that period of time is it fires off a query to the ECMS to say, what do you have for Naven Johnson? Because I think this user is going to start asking me questions about it. Now, if I click this link here that says, show me all of Naven Johnson's documents, what it does is it brings me to this screen here. It brings me to a screen that shows me all the documents that are in this collection related to Naven Johnson. It's also done something else. It's also grounded the AI so that the AI knows that Joe, the user, is going to probably start asking questions about Naven Johnson, not somebody else. So now instead of looking at potentially hundreds of thousands of records, I'm now looking at maybe 50 records, all the records that apply to Naven Johnson. And so from here, I can do all the searches we talked about, field level search, full text search, but I could also converse with it. That's what this Ask Archie button does here. And so if I click that button, what it does is it opens up a, let's move that for a little bit further along. It opens up a chat interface, just like what you've seen in Copilot or ChatGPT, where I can now start talking to these documents to get information. So for example, I'm going to play the video here where in this particular case, I'm going to type in and I'm going to ask it, what is Naven's driver's license number? And when I click that button, what it does is it does a search into those documents and it returns to me Naven's driver's license number, and it lights it up so that it can actually bring me to the location in the document where that is. So as you can see here, it found it here and on the personal detail screenshot. So it's showing you all the information that that it was able to find. I'd like to mute this if I can. There we go. Okay. So that's one kind of search. Then I can say, well, what about who are Naven's dependents? So I can type in who are his listed dependents, and it's going to go out, it's going to do a search, and it may look now across multiple documents, and it finds out that there are two people that Naven has defined in the past as his dependents, his grandmother and his mother. And it returns some information. What it returns is totally up to how the AI engine is configured to handle these kinds of queries. I'm going to show you one more search. I'm going to ask it to tell me what weeks or how many weeks did Naven work overtime. Now, this is an interesting question because it's got to do a couple of things. First of all, it has to determine, well, what do I mean by overtime? Well, one of the things that's in one of those preambles is a piece of information that tells the AI engine that in this company, anybody who works over 40 hours in a given week is considered to have worked overtime. So first of all, the AI engine needs to know that. It gets that from the document, and then it runs through all the timesheet documents to find out, well, which weeks did he work overtime? And in this case, it returned 5 weeks, including it found 1 week where there was an error, where it says he worked 47 hours, but the number of hours is actually 32 hours on the timesheet. So it even detected something. The bottom line here is that, and I believe this is the way it's going to work in the future, is that people are going to converse with corporate data. They're not going to say, well, I want to do a full text search on this, or I want to search for all invoices for Sunset Point software in the period of, January through June of 2023. No, they're going to go in and they're going to ask questions of AI to say, answer this question for me. Find this information for me. Export this to a Excel spreadsheet so I can do further analysis. All of that is going to come from AI, and we enable that for all of your old information. You're not going to get that if you mothball it. You're not going to get that if you abandon it, obviously. And you're not really going to get anything good if you just store it in SQL, because again, that's just raw data. Whereas what we've done is we've preserved the user interface and all of that rich context. And through those preambles and introductions, all the color commentary to make this information better than it was, more accessible, more operational than ever before. And by the way, what you're seeing there is you're seeing that information available in a viewer that we have created. I can tell you that we are going to deprecate that viewer, and now we're going to use Copilot and Teams or whatever your AI interface is in order for you to do those searches. So if you store the information in SharePoint, the documents in SharePoint, you'll be able to search using any part of the AI stack of Microsoft tooling. If you store it in some other ECMS, if that ECMS wants to be in business, they are going to have a chat interface to their document repository. We inherit all of that. And with that, one other thing to mention too. This is a final point that's pretty important. Everything we've been talking about has been within the context of decommissioning, and that's good. That's our first product, very important. It's the obvious use case. However, what we're really doing here is something we call robotic document assembly, the use of RPA robots to crawl through applications, to extract information and build documents. Well, legacy snapshot decommissioning makes a lot of sense. Why not do it for that? But there are other use cases that this concept of RODA can be used for. And RODA is what we've actually applied for a patent, not the concept of legacy snapshot, but of RODA. Let's say, for example, that you're an organization that is highly acquisitive. We do a lot of work in the healthcare space with healthcare systems who are highly acquisitive. They're constantly acquiring smaller medical practices, and then they have the unfortunate burden of having to now integrate those practices into their larger organization. And usually they have to do it under the gun. They have to do it quickly because they have to demonstrate to the market, shareholders, investors, whomever, that the acquisition was worth doing and that the integration is going well. And so unlike the folks who do legacy snapshots who, we could do it, let's do it, it's important, yeah, we got to do it, but they're not under fire like folks who are acquiring organizations. So why not create a M&A snapshot that allows me to go out, grab all that information and attach it to the systems that are now used to govern these practices going forward. So M&A Snapshot is a product that we have that came directly out of this RODA concept. First customer we ever did was an e-discovery project. They had a system that they used to maintain information for discovery in a lawsuit, and very expensive to maintain that information in that system. So they asked, is there a way that we could create a snapshot, not of everything, but of this particular case? We want to go in and we want to do a snapshot and we want to archive it. Or why stop there? When we start a new case of litigation, we already know how to get documents out of our document system, but is there a way that we can go and take a snapshot of the information in our system, send that over as part of the discovery documents, and not give opposing counsel or interested third parties access to our internal systems? So can we create an e-discovery snapshot? So that is something that we have as well. And then there are others like compliance snapshots, where I need to provide auditors or regulators a snapshot of information in time. Or if I'm let's say, a pharmaceutical company and we're working on a new drug or something like that, where we have these clinical trials and these thing called clinical trial freezes, where at the end of a phase of a clinical trial, we have to freeze everything in place so that that becomes a historical record of this drug's journey. Well, why not create a snapshot of that as well? So as you can see, we spent a lot of time talking about decommissioning and legacy systems, and that's critically important. However, the real gold is this concept of robotic document assembly, which can be used for these other concepts. Other ideas that folks have mentioned to me is GDPR. If we get inquiries about what does a company know about us, they can go and they can create a legacy snapshot, turn that over to the requester. In addition, they could use those same robots to delete that information. So if a customer says, well, by law, I have a right to be forgotten, and this information here that you sent me, I want you to forget you ever saw it. Well, you can use the same robots to go and get rid of that information as well. So pretty cool set of use cases. Rhoda is the thing that we are most excited about, and Legacy Snapshot, M&A Snapshot, et cetera, et cetera. These are all just concrete implementations of the same concept. So that is it. That's all I have. I would be happy to take any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. I haven't seen any questions posted here. Let's just quickly move over to the Q&A area to see if people have questions there. No questions yet. I think let me start this conversation and ask you. So what are potential impediments to creating a legacy snapshot?
That's a great question. There are probably three impediments that I have seen. The first has to do with, let's remember, these are legacy systems. They're old systems. In order for the software robots to do their thing, they have to have a license to the software. And one of the things that we have found is that over time, as systems become less used, organizations tend to ease up on the number of licenses that they have for a piece of software. So if you want to go and, let's say, crawl through 1 million records of an application and you have one license to that piece of software, it's going to take some time to crawl through using that one license. So having access to licenses is one potential impediment. Another would be, again, these are old systems. How are they going to perform? Let's say I have 20 robots that are pounding on that application 24 hours a day, navigating to every record, taking screenshots, extracting that information. How is the performance going to be on that old system? Is it that old a system where if I have 20, 30, 50 robots banging on it 24 hours a day, that it's going to not respond properly? So that becomes an issue. And then there is one of scalability. The example that I always give here in the United States is that the IRS, which has systems, some systems that are 50 years old, is now going through a modernization process. And if the IRS came to me and said, Joe, we have our systems that have billions of tax returns, and we want to create legacy snapshots for those, my first recommendation would be, well, do you have to do everything at once? Because billions of records is going to take some time. It's probably going to take, depending upon how many robots you can allocate towards this, it could take 5, 10 years to do that. So there is a natural scalability issue when you start getting up into the hundreds of millions or billions of records. Is this the best way to do it? I would argue it might not be. It might be part of the plan. It might be part of the discipline, but now you're looking at probably a more traditional extraction of records using connectors and maybe supplementing certain pieces of information with legacy snapshots. So those are the three that I've seen. We haven't lost any deals because of that, but they are challenges that we have to get around that we see from time to time.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Joe, we can see how you handle access control to a snapshot document, but how do I manage access control to information contained within a snapshot document?
Excellent. That's a great question. I didn't talk about that at all. We have a facility within the product called layouts. And so, and this goes to licensing as well, because the way it's licensed is we license based on the number of records that we have to preserve, not necessarily the number of documents that we produce, but the number of records we preserve. So, for example, if I'm doing an ERP system and I want to create a snapshot for a customer, the customer is the one entity that goes against the license, not the fact that I want 4 versions of that customer document. Excuse me. So we have this facility called layouts, and layouts are a way for me to create different versions of the documents so that I can make them available to different constituencies that have made different access control. So if I want to have, let's say, a document that senior management can see and HR can see, I would create a layout for that. But then I have a document, I need a version that's available to, our accountants, let's say. Well, I might want to create a different layout that doesn't have certain pieces of information, maybe PHI or whatever that is in that document. So I can create multiple layouts. So think of it as I crawled through the application, I got all the customer information, but I created 4 versions of the information so that I can security trim it different way, and I can include different pieces of information in the document. So documents are secured at the ECMS layer based on however you do access control, and then you can further fine grain that control by creating different versions or layouts of the document.
Nice. All right, excellent. And then maybe a last question here, just quickly. Can I access these snapshot documents using Microsoft tooling like Teams and SharePoint? I think you have covered most of those, but your Microsoft suite fully integrates with accessing this content and these outputs.
Absolutely. In fact, we by default, there are 2 ways that we produce our snapshots. We produce obviously files that are the PDF files of documents, and also metadata files, which could be CSVs or JSON files. And we release those to a file share or wherever the customer wants it. We can also natively release them to SharePoint. Now, once they're in SharePoint, they now inherit all of the capabilities that one has. So if I want to use Microsoft Copilot, or if I want to use Teams or whatever to converse with this information, I can do so. Now, one of the things that we are creating right now and working with Microsoft on this is an AI agent that allows us to more finely ground the AI engine. Think of it as kind of if you've heard of the term RAG, it's like creating a RAG for legacy snapshot. But we believe that, and we originally created, you saw the video, the viewer that we created, we are deprecating that because we believe that people are not going to go to these individual viewer AI experiences to converse with corporate data. They want to go where they go to converse with everything else. They want to go to Teams. They want to go to SharePoint. They want to do it that way. And so rather than fighting that, we are going to just integrate that, have that be our viewer. And then the only, the point of value that we add is that button that you saw, that deep linker. We could put that button in any application, any Windows app, browser app, or green screen, so that you have contextual access from within any application, any future application, to the legacy snapshot.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I see a couple of questions have popped up in the Q&A section. The first one here from Tilo. Can this robot be used on systems that don't have a web interface?
Yes. In fact, that's the beauty of it. Any application that has a user interface, web apps, traditional Windows apps, legacy. In fact, most of the systems that we see today are still green screens. We're seeing AS400 applications. We're seeing mainframe applications. The beauty of what we're doing, just like the beauty of RPA, is that there's only one interface that guarantees to exist in a piece of software, and that's the user interface. And also, I don't care what the database is. I don't care how it was architected. I don't even need to talk to IT about this. All I need in order to do a snapshot is to talk to a user who uses the software, so they can tell us, this is how you find the information that we want to archive. So the answer to that is any piece of software, not just web interface.
Right. Another question here was from Dave. Which RPA platform do you use, or is it your own RPA framework?
That's a great question. It almost sounds like a planted question. I assure you it's not. We have RPA built into the product. You are free to use that. And when I say free, I mean literally free. It's included in the product. However, we have an API that allows you to use any RPA product you want. So if you want to use UiPath or Automation Anywhere or anybody else's RPA, Microsoft Power Platform, you can use any one you want. And then when your RPA robots gather the information, you make a call to our API to say, here's what was extracted, and then we take it from there. So you can use ours, which is included, or you can use any one that you're comfortable with.
Excellent. Ayanda is throwing a spanner in the works here. What about COBOL-based software from the 80s?
Doesn't
Because I
matter.
hope those are not still alive and kicking.
Absolutely. In fact, when I started my career back in 1986, one of my first customers was American International Group. And on the 6th floor of 70 Pine Street were a bunch of cranky guys drinking a lot of coffee who were the MetLife COBOL developers. Apparently, AIG had licensed a version of COBOL from Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. And these guys were the MetLife experts. And all they did was walk around the 6th floor drinking coffee, angry, making lots of money because they had a skill set that was critically important. That world hasn't changed that much. Yeah, MetLife COBOL is not in use in a whole lot of places, but yes, COBOL application, as long as we can get to those screens, which is usually done through some kind of Windows terminal emulator, we can get at this information. So COBOL, no problem. I gotta get myself a "We Love COBOL" button.
Nice. Guys, thank you very much. We're at the end, at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining the session this morning. Joe, thanks so much for sharing all the insights around the Sunset Point software. Guys, if you've got any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Stephanie or myself. We will also share the links in the recordings and anything supporting that you might need. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much and have a great day further. Bye-bye.
Thank you, folks. Have a good day.